really interesting guy too, and I was always just amazed, like, wow, you know, I've never been on a movie like this, and never seen people be so creative just at the drop of a hat, and just, they have a van out in the parking lot that has like a billion tools in it and a billion little weird connectors, and then, like same with the Freddy arms, you know, like, they just kind of rigged that up, and, you know, and it worked. Even though it looked pretty bad when I saw it.
The harness didn't work, the spandex worked.
Yeah, the spandex worked, and the long Freddy arms worked, and the bathtub definitely worked.
Very cool. First up, what's your name?
Jessica?
Oh, hey Jessica. I can't
Oh,
see
hi,
you.
James. My question for you is, over the years, you've been involved with a lot of the franchise. Obviously, you've been involved with the whole franchise, but I mean, I was just asking, who's gonna ask, have you ever had any Freddy-related nightmares or dreams?
Your own nightmares. In her Nancy cosplay.
I know, I met Jessica earlier. She looks really, really good. So yes, each film I had one or two dreams that really stood out to me. That Nightmare 1, I had them. It was mainly just about Freddy and the claws being so sharp, like, and getting too close to me, like always being worried that they were gonna cut me. But they never did in my dream, but I always was flinching and always like, you know, worried about these big claws in my face. That was the main dream I had in Nightmare 1. And then Nightmare 3, because I played kind of like the caregiver, all my dreams were very much like, we're on a ship, and the captain has gone mad, and everyone is gonna fall off the boat unless I save them, and then Patricia Arquette is like, gonna, you know, fly off the boat, and I have to somehow like bring her back in. Like, they were all about me not trusting the director. And they were all being really anxious that the kids weren't gonna be taken care of, and it was always on this boat that was like, you know, at Disneyland where the boat goes really high and then it goes on the other side really high. It was kind of like that, and all of the kids are just like tumbling around and falling into the water. And so that was the Nightmare 3 dream that I had a lot. And then Nightmare 7, the one thing I remember the most was the tongue wrapped around my head at the very end. It was very humiliating, that scene when we shot it, because I mean, it's not really, it's just an instance where some insensitive remarks are made, like while you're working and you're trying to concentrate, and there's a bunch of guys going, ha ha ha, you know, get the KY, you know, like all these kind of horrible just jokes. And back in the 80s, like that was really common, like as an actor or an actress. PC, yeah. Like nobody was PC, there was lewd jokes all the time, but for some reason in that particular situation, I felt really vulnerable. And so that tongue around my face and my head and everything, and just that remembering some of the remarks that were going on around me, I think I felt like a lot of shame. And so I had a very recurring nightmare where I'm just trying to like pull those tongues off my head. And my husband even claims that I would be like sitting in front of my fireplace at the house, like I'd sleepwalk, and just be like trying to pull these tongues off of me. And that was my terrible nightmare. And I actually haven't had that one in a long time, thank goodness.
So once the movie was over, did the nightmares stop?
No, they go on for years and
Oh my
years.
gosh. A little super
I'm
duper,
finally
yeah.
not having that nightmare, and thank goodness, yeah.
So, yeah, I hope it doesn't like bring it back for you.
Well, I think I talked about it. I mean, I didn't go to a therapist, but I did talk about it one day to somebody that was just kind of listening, and then I got really emotional, and I just thought, wow, I've just been really suffering with that for a long time. And then once I got it out of my system, that I had felt embarrassed and kind of ashamed, and I felt like I'd just been put in a position that I didn't like. And once I figured it out, then I didn't have that dream anymore.
Thanks, Jessica. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica.
Next up, hey.
Hello, Heather, I'm Brandon. I know besides being like the leading lady of the Nightmare series, you've also done a lot of behind the scenes work and creature work. One of my favorite films, Cabin in the Woods.
Yes.
Did you have a particular favorite creature that you worked on in that film? Anything that you helped bring to life that you
I
really
just love
enjoyed?
all the creatures in that film so much. My husband, David Anderson, he's the special effects makeup, I don't know, artist in our family. So he got that job, and I, for several years, my career was pretty, moribund, I would say. And I decided that I really wanted to help him out in any way I could for, helping him do his job as best as that he could. And so that meant, coming into the office, helping with payroll, doing the books, and helping him, manage what was getting to be a pretty successful, makeup effects lab in LA. So we started with Dawn of the Dead, the remake by Zack Snyder, and then after that, he got Cabin in the Woods, and gosh, every one of those creatures was kind of an homage to a creature that has already been in movies, and it's historic, beloved creature. But we had to figure out how to make them original and not look like we were just copying them. So I think, everyone is so close to me. I love the unicorn that stabs the guy. Making him was really hard, and we have a fur layer who just comes in and lays all that fur by hand, and the sculptures have to be done, and big molds of the horse's head, and super complex thing to make. But then we also had the merman, who of course is one of my favorites. And I wish he'd been on screen a little more, because he too is this giant creature, and so funny, such a funny moment in that movie, and the blowhole splurting blood, and that was a great one. I can't think of one that I didn't love. The ballerina girl, of course, was a pretty easy one to do. My husband sculpted those teeth that looked like they're going deeper and deeper into her skull. And that little girl played that part so beautifully. And she was pretty blind at wearing that makeup and had to do all the ballet for that part. That buzzsaw guy with the buzzsaw through his face. There's not one that I just don't think is fantastic.
So is it like a kid? You can't pick a favorite kid? You
I just can't pick a favorite
creation?
kid on that one. We had some great goblins. Oh gosh. Maybe the ballerina girl is so iconic, and I did do ballet my whole life, so maybe I like her one of the best.
Thank you very much, Heather.
So there's something that I read about too. You're saying creatures that you created in an homage to. You were part of another franchise that people might know a little thing about called Star Trek.
Yeah, so
you guys heard of Star Trek, right? Yeah, she said that. So the character that you played on Star Trek was an homage to somebody that you worked with as well, correct?
Right. So so that J.J. Abrams had a need for all sorts of alien creatures, but their budget for the aliens kind of ran out at a certain point, and he still wanted more aliens. So he asked David if he had any aliens laying around the shop that we could maybe use for a couple of scenes. And so David and I had worked on a movie that never got made, and we had made that character for a movie that never got made, and we owned it. So we suggested to J.J. well, we have this alien that only Heather can wear because it's made for her face. And he's like, oh, okay, that would be great. She can play that part then. So I never really expected to be in Star Trek, but I got to wear the whole uniform and the boots, and it was so
Very iconic.
Yeah, so that character was sculpted by a gentleman who is a fabulous sculptor, and he passed away maybe a year before we did Star Trek, so that's why we named that character Moto, because that was the name of the sculptor who did him.
That's such a great tribute, and something
Yeah.
that not a lot of people would know about.
Yes, well, thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, it's something that's really special.
I like that little tidbit stuff. It makes you, brings the humanity out in a person
Yeah.
rather than you just
Yeah.
being a character. Next person.
My name is Gracie, and I know you did a lot of shoots for the Nightmare films. Do you have any really funny ones that you remember? Any bloopers?
Okay, I'll tell you there are always a lot of bloopers, because believe it or not, there's a lot of laughter and jokes. And also Robert Englund is really funny, and he just sometimes makes you laugh even though he's looking like Freddy Krueger. So I'll tell you one that was really funny in Nightmare 3. We're in this dungeon, and it's at the very end where we're all gone into the dream, and we're all going to fight Freddy together. And he comes stepping out from behind this boiler room, and he has this little baby rabbit stuffed animal, like he's just like throwing over his shoulder, like the cutest little bunny. And we all just like burst out laughing because it was just so evil. But you know, there's a lot of funny moments, and a funny moment on Nightmare 1 actually that happened is, so Johnny Depp and I, we both wear very similar clothes. Like I'm wearing boys shirts and jeans, and he's wearing shirts and jeans. And so when they mixed up our jeans, and we both are like pretty much the same, the Levi size at the time, but mine were really short and his were really long on me. So like we got a big laugh out of that because we came out of our trailers wearing each other's jeans one day. And I don't know, guys, there's so many funny moments. But Robert would make us laugh all the time because he would often make up his own lines and just try to make you, he took the seriousness out of the room. And that's why I think the horror is so good, because behind it's all a lot of joy and a lot of
Well, he was one of the first bad guys that kind of played to the audience's funny bone too, and that's why I think a lot of people are so on the villain side with that series, is that he made us laugh in addition to making us scared. And a lot of his,
like your uncle or someone, just like your mom and dad say, oh, he's a bad influence, yeah, but you still love him more than
he'll take you out drinking. Yeah,
exactly. He's a little, show you the horror movies.
So with the ending of the first movie kind of giving an allusion to there being a sequel when you guys drive off in the car, were you surprised that you weren't asked back for the second?
Well, I mean, I don't even think that the producer understood what the possibilities of the sequels were at the time we did Nightmare 1 ending. We did 8 or 9 different endings, and that one just seemed to work the best. And I was hoping, I mean, actually never occurred to me they would make a sequel.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It never occurred to me that there was going to be a sequel, and then when I heard that there was a sequel, I was like, what is a sequel? And then, you know, the idea was that the house was the thing that was haunted, and it was the house that was the thing that Freddy was attached to.
Because that's where
And so, because that's where he, you know, his glove was in that boiler room, I mean, in that basement. So that made a lot of sense to me, and you know, I just shrugged and went, oh, that's cool. You know, Robert gets another job. You know, I didn't really think that Nancy needed to come back.
And at that time, is that when you moved on to Just the 10 of Us?
Yeah, it was just about that same time.
Yeah. So again, being an 80s kid, you guys grew up with like the Friday night TGIF, right? The whole lineup of all those sitcoms. We grew up with you as well. But then some of your sisters on that show had also done horror movies.
Right, no, I mean, it was really a weird coincidence, and our producers didn't even know it until we mentioned it. And Matt Shackman, he was a huge horror fan at the same time, and he was like so serious about becoming a makeup effects artist that he, in his spare time, would rent out space at K&B and like learn to sculpt from them. And he really thought we really thought he was going to be a makeup effects person, but then he ended up going to Yale and became a big director, and now does Game of Thrones and WandaVision and all of that. Yeah, so that was my little brother on Just the 10 of Us.
That's cool that you moved on,
Yeah.
continued on. Between Nancy and Marie, your character on Just the 10 of Us, which one do you feel is more like you, or if there's little bits of you in each one, why do you think that?
I mean, they're both me. If I had, if I had a different life, but I think Nancy's extremely close to me. I didn't have to really dig deep to find things to make Nancy real. Like, I just felt she was just kind of an average teenager, and Wes had her doing a lot of things that weren't average, but nothing that was outside of the realm of most people's lives. So I felt like it was really accessible. I didn't have to think that hard about like what was I gonna do. Marie, on the other hand, like, you know, she was like had this weird dancing, and she was like really, you know, she just had all these affectations for being such a Catholic, you know, a very devout Catholic, which, you know, I did not grow up in a super devout family, so a lot of that was, you know, we just kind of made up a lot of the little weird habits that she had, and she started out a much more normal girl, and then after the second season was, you know, in full swing, we made her a lot weirder, and that's kind of, we wanted her to be so different than the other girls.
So much more of a character rather
Much
than
more of a
just-
character,
yeah.
definitely, yeah.
Gotcha. Next up.
Hello, my name is Chris. Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think I saw it in the Never Sleep Again documentary, and you even prefaced it and talked about it at the beginning of this interview, that you always felt like you were overshadowed by Robert. I love Robert, but when I think about Nightmare on Elm Street, I think of you.
Oh, thank you.
You're definitely, you know.
I wasn't seeking any kind of.
No, not at all.
I know what you're saying.
I've always wanted to say that to you.
Thank
If
you.
I ever would have met you, said, here I am. Yeah, but you're definitely Mount Rushmore of
Oh,
Final
man,
Girls.
thank you.
Yeah, and well, I think my question is, we've lost John Saxon, and we lost Dusty Hill with ZZ Top. I was wondering what they were like to work with.
Well, John was like your mentor, wasn't he?
Yeah, John, well, I mean, he was just movie star, and, you know, my parents' generation looked at him like, you know, the Brad Pitt guy. I mean, he was such a sexy, powerful man in the 60s, and so everyone I knew looked up to him. However, I was not like very familiar with all of his roles, and I only became familiar after I met him, and then he would talk about his stories working with, oh gosh, I mean, Katharine Hepburn, and like, I mean, all the big movie stars. And he had so many movies on his resume. So once I met him and figured out what an important person he was in film history, I did really seek out his movies, and he was always, you know, pretty reserved person on the set. He never sought me out. He was only there a few days. So once we had the chance to work together on Nightmare 3, I think we really became friends. And then, believe it or not, like on the convention circuit, meeting and with his wife, and we would have breakfast, and then I really got to know him and got to know his family, and so it's really because of, you know, conventions that I learned to really love him like an uncle, and he's such a sensitive guy, and you know, he had a very strong Italian upbringing, and so he had a lot of a vulnerability that he never showed people, and he was always like such a stoic, tough guy, but I think I learned from him just what a softy and sweetheart he really was.
ZZ Top, did you?
I never really talked to them very much because we did all that filming of the storyline without them there, and they literally like drove up in a limo and did their stuff, and then left, and we really weren't even in the same location for very long at all.
Were you a fan at the time when you filmed the
Oh,
video?
definitely, yeah. I mean, I'm from Tulsa, and ZZ Top is huge, so
Great name.
I was like super starstruck. I'm a very starstruck person, so like I'm literally cowering in the corner, like too embarrassed to say hi.
Are there any people during this round that you're starstruck by?
Oh,
That you're
here today?
sharing the room over there with?
Oh, I mean, I know them all so well
Yeah.
now. No, I mean, no, I think they're all good friends by now, yeah.
Yeah.
We've been doing this for a
You
long time.
having the little bit in Star Trek, you also have a couple other cameos I thought were really interesting. You were in a couple episodes of American Horror Story.
Well, I was just in the one episode. I was, so my husband was doing a scene where all the ladies at the Tupperware party get their throats slashed.
The freak show
And,
season?
and so I just thought, oh, this is gonna be such a great scene, because all these ladies, they were
So at some point, I don't know why, they went outside to smoke or do something crazy, I don't know. And I remember like army men crawling into my sister's room, it'll date me, with a shag carpet and the waterbed. And the TV was on the other side of the waterbed. And I remember crawling up and grabbing onto here, and the movie was playing. And right when I looked up over the waterbed is right when Barlow came up and I screamed, I'm too young! I'm too young! And ran out of the room. And that was that was like a big threshold, like crossing for me, where I'm like, okay, I can do this. And later on, I eventually watched the film, but at the time, I was like,
So that set the standard for you.
absolutely.
Yeah, I was the same way with Poltergeist and clowns. Nope, can't do them now, so.
To understand that, I had so many nightmares from that clown.
Thank you.
Back.
Oh, good. I have something in common with Derek Mears. All right. Hi. What's your name?
Hi, Eric.
Eric. What's your question?
So you've done a lot of cool roles with a lot of cool costumes, but the two that I really like personally, you were a Predator and you were the Swamp Thing. And we met yesterday and we talked a little bit about the eyes and everything, but and you probably have gotten this before, but you hear about literal horror stories of people that sit in the chair for so many hours with prosthetics. So that was so it's a two-part question. like of the two, which one took the most time? And then when you're doing the role and acting, which one was kind of like the easiest or the not so easiest to move around and do what you
Okay.
do? Again, thank you for coming out.
Oh, man. Too nice, man. Thank you so much, A, for being so kind, and also for your question. That's a great question. So the hours, Predator, it took about an hour and a half to 2 hours to get into, which is not bad at all. Which is, since it's molded for my body, it wasn't that tough. Swamp Thing, it was supposed to be 4 hours every day, but the makeup artists, who are like Oscar-winning guys, they started doing. They had 2 guys working on me at the same time, and they got the 4 hours down to 2 hours, which is unheard of, and I'm so thankful for them. But to answer your second part of the question of what was easier and what was more difficult, Predator was, I would say, between the two, easier. The only difficulty we kind of had on that is we were shooting in Austin, Texas when we were doing Predators, and a cold front came in that hadn't been that cold in Austin since the 1950s.
Yeah, you don't think of Austin as being cold.
No, not at all, but everyone's wearing like the North Face jackets. There was a C-stand that holds like some of the camera flags and whatnot, and there was water dripping off it, and like icicles were frozen. Like that's how cold it was. And we'd have people walk around set going, oh, with Brian Steele and I in the outfits going, oh, you guys are like the warmest guys on set. And we're like, no, you don't get it, because once you do physical activity, you start to sweat, you can't get warm again. You're always wet, and that chills. So it's brutal. And there were scenes where I'm literally, they're rolling camera, and I walk over to Brian's mask like when we're fighting, and I'm chipping ice off of his visor so he can see in the fight scene. It was crazy. But that was easier compared to Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing, the suit was the best thing I've ever worn. It's the best thing it could be. But
It was like brand new and like groundbreaking what they did for you for that, right?
yeah, they did some new stuff, which is really cool, because there's this polyfoam inside of it, because I would be in the water, out of the water, they dried so fast.
Yeah, it was like moisture wicking, right?
Yeah, not really wicking, but
It
it
did
could
absorb
get out
it, yeah.
easier, and you could shoot faster rather than just walking around like kind of an obese Swamp Thing, kind of sludgy, going, this is just water, guys.
Just water weight.
So stupid. But Swamp Thing was the crazy thing about that, because all the interior stuff we shot. We had a swamp set built that cost like $2 million. And so they had this indoor water set that they could interchange with different parts of the islands and whatnot. So there's like 6 different stations, and they would change the scenery around depending on where you were, and like it was phenomenal. But the water had to be a certain degree, because there always has to be safety divers in there, because we have crew walking around in case somebody fell in, or other actors in the water. It had to be a certain heat, so it wouldn't, ruin them for the entire day, which isn't very good when you come in wearing a full lockdown suit and there's people wearing tank tops and sweating, and you're like just trying to breathe. And okay, cool, what are we doing? Let's shoot this. But the other thing I could expand on that is that when you're acting, your body doesn't know that you're lying to it. So I'm going through emotional states, like especially with Swamp Thing, like being that he's manic and trying to deal with that existential crisis of who he is. And it'd be day after day after day, and you're mentally, your brain is like, I can't breathe, this is nuts. And so it becomes more, not just physically fatiguing, but mentally fatiguing.
Like survival mode.
Yeah, at one point my wife called me and she's like, hey, how are you doing? And I go, I've done 4 days in a row of heavy days, and I go, I'm physically spent. I go, but I feel like I'm falling through this blackness, trying to grab a branch or something for stability. And then I expected her to be, empathetic, and then she just starts laughing. And I'm like what? And she goes, sweetheart, you've been manic for so many days, like the character's starting to bleed into your normal life. And I go, oh, someone reads books. All right, cool. So it was
diagnosing you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Like, thanks for being on my side, honey.
Yeah, sure. No, she's so great. But yeah, so it was a challenge all around. But also both of them, I'm a fan representing the fans. Like, pain is temporary, film is forever. But I got to be a part of what? Like, thank you, universe. And again, it can end at any time. And if it does, I'm cool with it, man. It's been a great run.
I think I need a t-shirt. Pain is forever. Pain is temporary. Film is forever.
Yep.
Put that on a pillow. That's great.
Totally, for sure.
It's totally true. Hi.
Hi. I'm Rebecca, and I have this might tickle your creative bones a little bit. That sounded weird. But anyways, I was wondering, since you're a fan of the Friday the 13th series, is there any particular story or plot elements that you want to see the series tackle that hasn't been done previously?
I mean, there's so much you can do with the series, but all of us as fans, like, we sit around and hypothesize about like what could possibly be done. But it's such a difficult time right now to do newer things, because especially with remakes, there's a balance that you have to do where you have to be respectful from the past, but also take a risk for a whole new generation. Because the hope is that, you know, the new generation, that's their entry point into the series, and we'll go back and watch the originals. But people are so staunch about, like, no, this is how you do it, and this is my favorite version, and I think they feel threatened that their version's wrong, or like that what they like doesn't matter, and that's never the case.
I think it's going to dishonor it.
Exactly. So it's a hard balance, because you have to, you know, try to appease everybody, which you ultimately will never do. But you strive for the best. But for my angle, I really don't know. I mean, we all have so many different theories and like ideas of what you could do. The script that Shannon and Swift wrote, the sequel to the one that we were supposed to do, took place in the snow. And everyone was really excited about that. The script was really, really good. There was another time around, I guess a lot of people don't know, we were going to do, after the one I did, years later, we were going to do another Friday the 13th. I went and met with the producers and we were talking about it. And that time around, the script was written by, at the time, the guy who just won the Oscar for writing the movie Prisoners. And the script was more of it's Friday the 13th, but more like a drama. Where when I met him, I go, whoever your four leads are, they have to be stellar actors.
Yeah.
Like, this is, you're taking this kind of to the next level.
This isn't a slasher film, yeah.
Yeah, kind of like to the Hannibal level, where you still, like,
It's psychological?
psychological, but also physical, and so like combined kind of the two, and it was really, really good. But the bummer was, they were already building sets, we're getting ready to go shoot in Atlanta, and I hadn't signed yet, and the day that I was supposed to get an offer from Paramount, they pulled the plug on the entire project because the sequel to the Rings came out, and they had spent like $25 million on that, like making it and promoting it, and it bombed terribly. And at the time, when I heard one of the upper management was like, "Oh, Friday the 13th is an old horror film remake, like the ones, you know, like the Ring. The same thing's gonna
So
happen."
the sins of the father.
Yeah,
It's like, come on,
please,
come on.
the
No,
horror
it's
film's coming.
honestly. Do you think it's still like maybe floating out there as a possibility?
I mean, it always is, because like ultimately there's the art side of things, and then there's the business side of things, where people, like the businesses or studios, want to make money, and that money's waiting there. But because I don't know the ins and outs of the lawsuit that's happening between Victor Miller and Sean Cunningham, I have nothing to do with any of that. But I heard they reconciled. But I don't know if anything's happening right now, because they have to play nice with each other, and I have no idea.
Everything's kind of in limbo.
Yeah. I even told them, look, even if they come back and like, I'm not the guy, like, I'm not worried.
Just make more
Just make more
stories.
Fridays.
Yeah.
I'm a fan, I want to see more.
So are you a fan more of, like you said, the personal side, the humanity side of Jason, or do you like some of that supernatural that they've given him a couple times?
Well, eventually you have to go supernatural, because I no matter what I do, I try to find the humanity in it, because I think that's what ties us all into liking whatever that is. But I have no problem going supernatural in the future, because the one that I did, he was a normal dude, even to the point of I felt bad. I didn't feel bad, I was disappointed, because in the original script, by the end of the script, Jason kind of becomes like the Jason how we all know him, where he's slower moving, but he's still like this train chugging forward, because he's been injured, like Arlen and everybody, all the damage he's done, and so he's still like limping, and he seems hurt, but he's still going forward. And they were afraid that would come off as weak and not intimidating. And I go, no, let's play that, because that's even more terrifying. Where like,
unstoppable
this guy
force.
is still coming, and like he thinks I murdered his mother, and that's his only tie to love. He's going to fucking murder me. Like, it's not me, dude. It's not me. But
Doing a different force.
yeah, they decided not to do it that way, because they wanted more of the for the younger generation, the more popcorny, you know, scream and have more of an event feel to the film. I totally understand.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways stories can go as it is. And if there's a fan out there who sees that, maybe they'll be inspired to make their own.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the exciting thing, is like all of us, like, I got to the point now with trailers. If I know I'm gonna watch something, I won't watch the trailer, because as human beings, they'll give you points of the story, and we tie those dots together in our own personal experiences, and we're gonna make a story in our head that's way better than whatever that is.
Yeah.
So when I watch it, if I do that, it takes away a certain percentage of my surprise. So now I try to avoid, if I know I'm gonna watch something, all spoilers, everything. I wanna go in blank and not know anything.
I just said that the other night in the movies, they were showing, the film, beforehand, and it's just like, there's so much shown in those teasers anymore. They're almost like mini movies. It's like, well, I don't need to see it now.
Yeah, absolutely. They wanted to sell it that way, but also in the sense of they give so much away, and sometimes you're like, oh, it was a harrowing experience for one of the characters here, but I remember in the trailer, he's fighting the dinosaur later on, so like, no, he's gonna be okay.
Yeah, so it kind of ruins your suspense of this movie. Yeah. Next up.
Thank you, Rebecca, for your question also.
Yeah.
Hi, Derek. It's wonderful to meet you. Thank you for coming out.
What's your name?
Carl.
Gotcha.
And I kind of have like two questions.
Sure.
One is in depth. The other one is just kind of a normal question. Obviously, your Jason from the remake is a Jason we've never really seen before, because your Jason is setting traps, alarms to know where everyone is,
Tunnels.
making underground tunnels. And so when you first read that in the script, were you kind of like surprised that this was like your Jason? Were you expecting something else? How did you react to a more intelligent, strategizing Jason?
When I first approached or first read the script, before reading the script, it could have been Jason in the Wild West, and he was part cyborg and possessed by a demon. I'm like, let's do it! I love Jason, let's make it happen!
Jason's in a burlesque group and he's 13. I'm writing it, don't steal it.
But when I read it and I talked to the writers, their approach was, this is nothing to people in the past, whatever, they go, this time around, they go, before Jason had been more of an entity and not so much of a character. This time we wrote him as a character, and we want a professional actor that can emote and bring this together. And when I read the script, I go, I love the take, because they purposely made him a real person, knowing there would be sequels coming afterwards, and they could go supernatural in the sequels. And also, they purposely made the kills a little more subtle and not so big, because knowing that they gave them somewhere to go in the future so they can get bigger and more elaborate as the series was supposed to continue.
The arrow was just so clean.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, as a fan beforehand, I was really happy with their justification of him teleporting, and the bits of people running and falling, but using the tunnels and him having a sense of where people are, because of justifying, with the little traps and that. I thought it was a brilliant take on it.
Awesome. And my second question is more common. What's your favorite kill you performed in that movie?
The one that I did?
Yeah. Mostly mine is the when we burned the girl alive in the sleeping bag.
Oh yeah.
That's hard to watch.
That was an homage to Kane's sleeping bag kill. Whether we have to do something different, but kind of along those lines, because everyone, in the series in general, that's still my favorite kill. The slamming against the tree of the sleeping bag, just so good. And on the one that I did with Aaron Yu, the Chewie character, the slow screwdriver saving Private Ryan moment, where it slowly goes into his head as I'm holding his head back.
And squelch.
Yeah. Also, I get way too into some of the stuff, because like at certain points, like Marcus, the director, Derek, when you're doing this thing, you grab his head and you're pulling his chin back on camera. I go, yeah, because if you just do this, it's not going to go to the brain. You have to angle it this way. And he's like, you're a messed up dude. And I'm like, yeah.
Don't think about that part.
Just being real. And the same thing when we were doing the arrow sequence. Well, that was one of the earlier ones we shot. And I go, hey, Marcus, I have a cataract eye on the left side. I go, if I'm doing this, that's the eye I'm spotting with. It doesn't make sense. He's not going to be able to see. And I go, do you want me to switch? I go, from fighting, I can switch. I'm right-handed, but because with fighting, I can switch ambidextrous. I go, do you want me to switch and do the entire show left-handed? I can do the machete left-handed and do it this way where it's appropriate. And he's like, you're overthinking this. Like, it's a slasher, man. And I go, no, I get it, but
Just
you've got to
kill the
ground it in
teenagers.
reality. Because somebody online is going, question.
Oh, it's smart that you think that way. Exactly. Dissect every little thing. Yeah.
But also, I mean, Dustin Hoffman talked about it once, like whatever role you play, you need to be skilled and study everything about that. Because if you're like a cowboy in a show and you don't, fasten your saddle correctly or appropriately how to put the bridle in, a cowboy somewhere is gonna go, nope, and it's gonna take them out of the film. And our job as actors is to keep people in for what they're watching.
So you were saying being cast in, thank you very much.
Was the one with us on the set. He was the one that really guided us. He was like a child actor whisperer. And so he instilled not show business tricks. There's no trick to show business. You work hard, you listen, you pay attention, be prepared. I think one advantage I had as a child is I started so young, the lessons were very fundamental, and very simple. And those lessons have not changed over the years. I was very fortunate to be successful early on, and I just have kept repeating it. And what I learned, my acting knowledge is to relax, get into the moment, bring myself into that character, and listen. Really listen. Now that doesn't mean in every moment of my acting career I've always listened, but it's one of those things. It's a fallback thing. Am I struggling with a character? Am I struggling with a moment? Am I fumbling with dialogue? Well, it's funny how if you just stop, slow down, and listen, things start to fall into place. And that is a tool that I learned from way before I remember, because I started acting when I was 2 years old. So I don't have any memories. I don't really have any pure memories of me working as an actor until I was about 5 or 6. So these are all things that I just learned by osmosis. And also another thing for just the acting geeks out there, everybody in life is motivated by something at every moment. There's always a reason. And as a child, it was simply, well, Clint, why are you going into the scene? Why are you saying this? Are you trying to get something from your parents? What is your intention with the scene? So kind of always understanding what the motive of my behavior is at the time was always a great trigger for me to get into that moment and be honest.
And you, of course, are one of the few actors that have gotten to be part of Star Trek and Star Wars. So can you tell us a little bit about, a galaxy far, far away and also Space: The Final Frontier?
Well, as far as a galaxy far, far away, I found out that Ron was going to replace these directors and direct solo, and I was excited for him. And Ron and I have a wonderful, close relationship. But my goodness, Ron was stepping into a position where they had already been filming for like 70 some odd days. So in my mind, I thought, well, the cloth is cut here. The actors have all been hired. There's going to be nothing for me to do. And then Ron gave me a call, and it's always a lovely phone call to get from my brother. And he goes, I think there might be something in this one for me. And he actually told me later, he didn't even suggest it. It was Kathleen Kennedy is the one that when they were having their initial meetings, there was a sequence that they were going to have to redo, which meant they were going to have to recast this role. And Kathleen Kennedy said, well, this might be a really good spot for your brother. And Ron was, of course, tickled that he didn't have to, well, he doesn't. Ron does not strong-arm me into his films. It's only if I can fit. Listen, I consider Ron, first of all, he's a great older brother. So he's an awesome older brother. He's a Hall of Fame film director. But he's the director, and I am just an Indian working, And if he can find a spot for me, I certainly will do it. Well, this character, Rava Keeley, came up, and as he described it to me over the phone from London, it was something I go, yeah, I can play that guy. I think originally, as it was described, I was Mickey from Rocky, the grizzled old trainer, except instead of training a fighter, I was training a robot. And that's how Ron pitched me the idea, and I said, sure, bud, I can do it, I certainly want to jump on an airplane and go be in Star Wars. And just a little side note here, I auditioned for Luke Skywalker back in about 1975. Yes, in fact, I remember really vividly. It was we were auditioning. It was a big open audition. They were seeing dozens and dozens of actors that day. They were probably seeing hundreds of actors over the course of a few weeks to see. It was like an open call, and it was at 20th Century Fox Studios, and we were waiting outside. And I remember seeing Mark Hamill. Mark Hamill was like going to be coming in a little bit later. And I had been given the sides. Now this is long before there was any videotape, anything digital. There were no, what do they call it? You know, you do it from home. The auditions, you do it from home. So everybody went in and read, and I got the sides, and okay, I'm going to play this character, Luke Skywalker. And I went into the room. I saw Francis Coppola in the room. Now, Francis had already done The Godfathers. It's like, Jesus, Francis is in the room, you know. And now Ron had already been in American Graffiti, so I knew that they knew me. But there was, Francis Coppola was in the room, there was a veteran film producer, Fred Roos was in the room, there was another guy, Gino Havens, in the room, and I didn't see George. George was in a big leather chair about this big, and it was the back, he was turned away from me. And as I walked into the room and got ready to stand in front of the desk, George Lucas swung his chair around, and I saw him, and he looked at me and he went, "Commander Baylock, the Corbinite maneuver." And in my mind, I said, "George, get a friggin' life." See, you gotta understand, I did my Star Trek appearance, my first Star Trek appearance, when I was about 6 years old. And I considered myself a baby. I was a baby. You know, and here I was competing for a major role as an adult. And the last thing I wanted the director to do was look at me and say, "I remember you when you were a baby." That's why I said, "Get a friggin' life, George." I didn't say it. I thought it. Then as it turns out, George had a friggin' life. You know. But that was, and that was way before Star Trek was ever being syndicated. That was, George got his inspiration from science fiction from Star Trek. And hence, I did my first episode of Star Trek. It aired the season in 1966. And I presently have 4 versions of Star Trek television shows that have been aired. And I can't say anything, but they're doing a season of a show called Strange New Worlds. Yeah. And they're going to do, I think it's an episode, they're starting out with doing 10 episodes a season. And it's pretty exciting, and all I can say is stay tuned, folks. And wait, one thing about the world of Star Trek. I did it when I was a child, right? And Corbinite maneuver, fun, great experience. And then when they started doing the television series, we got word, when I say we, it was myself and my agent, got word that they were not seeing anybody that had been on the original, Star Trek, the original show. They weren't seeing anybody for Next Generation. And they weren't seeing anybody for Deep Space Nine that had been on Star Trek. So it was like, okay, I would like to be on the show, but if they have a policy of not having any actors like, that have been on previously, I understand. Well, my agent called me, and this was during Deep Space Nine, called me and said, "Listen, babe, I got you an audition for Deep Space Nine." And I said to him, I go, "Well, I don't think they're gonna hire me because they have a policy of not hiring any old actors. They've probably forgotten about that." So I auditioned and got the role. I played a character named Brady in it was called Past Tense. It was on Deep Space Nine, and I did that, and then I did Enterprise, and then I did Discovery. So far, there it is.
And I know you were recently reunited with William Shatner.
Yes, I ran into Bill Shatner at GalaxyCon, and what a wonderful experience that was, because I hadn't seen him in a long time. Now, I had seen him since we had done the Star Trek, the episode, The Corbomite Maneuver, because there was one time, and I must have been about 40 years old, he had written a series of science fiction books, and he was doing one, he was going to direct a TV movie of one of his science fiction books. And I auditioned for the role. And I got a chance to go in and see him and audition in front of William Shatner, and he didn't hire me. And listen, I hold no grudges. I laugh about when I think to myself, he didn't hire me. But no, listen, directors have to make decisions, and they decided not to hire me. But then I was able to, it was just a few months ago. I saw it, and we had a really nice chat back in the green room, and he's getting up there in years, but he remembered, and we had a fun little chat, and he's a very lovable guy. If you guys ever have a chance to meet him, what an icon. My goodness, William Shatner. He was in Twilight Zone, for crying out loud. He saw the dude out on the airplane, out on the wing. So anyway, yeah, that was...
He's been to space.
Yes, he has been to space, yes. And he's been on a horse. Actually, here's one thing. This is news that's long since passed. No one's going to care. No one's going to get in trouble. I have 2 artificial hips, and so does Bill's got one. And in fact, when I had my artificial hip done, my first one done, my surgeon, and I'm not going to get him in trouble because he could get in trouble for this. He said to me, he goes, your co-star just had his done 10 days ago, and he's already been on a horse. And then, you know what, Bill Shatner, he's a Canadian, and he grew up on a farm, a horseman, a ranch. And one tough SOB. Here he was 80 years old, he just had his hip replaced. And the day that they released him for physical activity, his choice was to go to his horse and get on him. Tough son of a bitch. I got on a horse. I needed a step stool. But coming up this summer, I'm in a movie called The Old Way, which is a Western that Nick Cage is the star, and Ryan Kiera Armstrong is the co-star. She's wonderful. She was in American Horror Story, the past season of American Horror Story. She played the lead in Firestarter also. But anyway, this is Nick Cage's first Western that he ever shot. And we filmed it up in Montana, and it was a wonderful opportunity to go up there and work with Nick and work on a film. My wife, Kat, and my daughter, Rafa, came up and we hung out for 5 or 6 weeks working on this movie, and I did. I got up on a horse, I rode around, I did some of my own stunts, and it was a wonderful experience. And it's a good movie. And if you get a chance to see it, coming up later on this summer, it's called The Old Way. And Nick Cage is very dynamic in this movie, and I think it'll be a popular picture.
Awesome. We can't wait to see it. That's awesome. Thank you. All right, so we do have a microphone set up right in the middle of the room. Whatever questions you guys may have, now is your time to ask. All right, you're up first. What's your name?
Stephen. Besides your brother, your niece has become quite a prolific director these days too.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, so far, what do you think of her work? And has she ever said anything on Uncle Clint? I think I have something I want you to direct you in.
Well, that's already happened.
It happened.
Thank you. Yes. Well, not on Mandalorian yet. But one of the first things she ever directed was part of a Lifetime Channel series, and it was called Call Me Crazy. And actually, it was it wasn't a series. It was a movie that they broke it up, and they had like 4 or 5 different stories, like an anthology about the human condition, and they were all directed by women. It was a women-driven, women-centric kind of production. And Bryce got to direct one of the episodes. And in fact, her episode was called Call Me Crazy. And she did call me. She said, Uncle Clint, I'd love you to come down. It's not much of a part, but you gotta come down and be in my movie. And I was, Bryce, I would love to. And both me and her mother, Cheryl, came down, and it was sort of the premise of the part of the movie that we were in was it was an insane asylum, and it was a little like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It was group therapy for wackos. Which I can see why I got hired for. I don't know about Cheryl. But anyway, watching Bryce direct brought tears to my eyes because her mannerisms so much mimicked her dad. The way she would approach actors, the way she would bounce from Video Village to the set to give an actor a final note, to the way she would interact with the crew, it reminded me so much of Ron. And in fact, after I worked a couple of days on the show, and the first day, I came home and I had to call Ron. I said, Bud, first of all, you gotta be really, really proud of your daughter, because she's just fine. She holds the reins as good as anybody. And you should be so proud because she has all of your best qualities and all of her mother's best qualities. Cheryl, Ron's wife, they've been married almost 50 years now. That Bryce has, as my dad would say, taken the bit. She's charged forward as a director, and she's wonderful. But I'll give you one little story. She does. Seriously, she had the same mannerisms as Ron, the way she would kind of go up to people and talk to them and stuff, and whisper in their ear. Except, and I told this to Ron, I said, there's one thing that your daughter does that you shouldn't do because you're going to get in trouble if you do it. And that is, as she's talking to an actor, she will play with their hair. Like, she'd do it with me, obviously. She'd play with. But she would, as she would lean in to give an actor a little note, private moment, why don't you think about this, or why don't you slow down a little bit here? This is kind of a conversation that a director has with an actor that they don't necessarily want to publish. You don't want to advertise this, just a simple note, But then Cheryl or Bryce would lean in and immediately start twirling their hair. And Ron, and I told Ron, I go, if you do that, people will think you're weird. And Ron laughed and he goes, well, you know what that's from? She's the oldest sibling. Bryce has been twirling people's hair since she had her first sister. It's something that Bryce does, and we all get a laugh at that. But I'll tell you, again about Bryce. She's a great person. She means what she says. She does not talk out of both sides of her mouth. She has the wonderful combination of Ron's sensibilities and her mom, Cheryl's passion. And I wish her all the best. Of course I wish her the best, because eventually she's going to make another big studio movie and she might hire me.
Thank you. I wasn't going to do a Lifetime project, so I'm really glad I asked.
Oh no, cool. We had like a mission control camp where we really got into the weeds about what these guys did, how they did it, what their mentality was, what their thought process was. And yes, the tape loops is what they called them. From back room to front room, the loop that had Gene Kranz. We had it all. I played a guy named Cy Liebergut. And Cy Liebergut was actually instrumental in bringing those tape loops to everybody's presence. He says, we have those. So we listened to the tape loops. And in fact, listen, Ed Harris is one of the great American actors that we've had in this last 2 centuries. He's just been dynamic. He was dynamic in Apollo 13. He was dynamic in the Jim Carrey movie,
Truman Show.
Wait, I'm sorry, again? Yeah, The Truman Show. He played Christoph, the director. And so Ed Harris is this great actor. He would listen to Gene Kranz's voice, because his tape, he had a cassette tape, that had Gene Kranz barking orders and getting information from all the different stations, And just to get the pattern down. And he wasn't, I don't call this cheating, I'm just calling this having a wonderful tool. He had his little Walkman tape player, and he would listen to the way Gene Kranz would talk. And then he would put it down and he would do the shot. And I'll tell you, I've worked with some fine actors. Ed Harris is about as good as I've ever worked with. It was a wonderful experience. So yes, we used everything. And I'll tell you one thing about Apollo 13 is, and they've told me this in retrospect, Dave Scott was the first astronaut to walk on the moon, and he was one of our technical advisors. At first, when they heard that Ron Howard was making a movie called Apollo 13, they were very skeptical. Because you probably don't realize this, there was a TV movie made about Apollo 13 years before. It was just, it showed on television. And it was really, I heard it was really bad. It was just cheesy and a soap opera, and it was wrong. And so the mission control people were very leery. And it wasn't until they really understood the passion that Ron had and Tom Hanks had and John Sayles had about getting it right. Because the one thing that Ron always was very strong about is this is not cowboys and Indians. These people are not, this is not Top Gun or All the Right Stuff. These were men in mission control and the men up in the capsule facing an extraordinary challenge. And in fact, Jim Lovell was the first to say they didn't do anything. The guys up in Aquarius and the Odyssey, they were just doing what mission control was telling them to do. Now they had been trained to be test pilots and they knew that this was part of the job. But that, you know, the real heroes were those hundreds and hundreds of men. It wasn't just a handful of people at NASA. It was hundreds and hundreds of guys in Alabama and Houston, you know, and the Cape. They all they came down on this problem and to solve it using, as it says in the movie, using computers that are small enough to fit in a room. Like Cy Liebergott told me, the computer on Aquarius, which was the lunar module, the computer on Aquarius didn't have as much memory as a pocket organizer. I mean, remember, computers were just at their very infancy. You know, so these guys were solving problems with slide rules. You know, slide rules and brain power. And it's sad to say, it's not sad to say, it's a reality. It was all men back then. All men, and this is almost worse than saying all men, all cigarette smoking men. I mean, Jesus, we were all the actors had to smoke all the time, and we were just hacking our lungs out, you know. Ed Harris was, before the movie, Ed Harris was trying to quit smoking cigarettes, and that was a bad time to quit smoking cigarettes. Anyway, there's my Apollo 13 run. Cool.